Guild Master Adisa brought the full council to the first loom on the third morning after the alignment, and Tibigia stood at the entrance and counted the ways the next hour could go wrong. 12 master weavers. 12 lifetimes of institutional certainty about to collide with a truth that predated their institution by 1,000 years. The stone stairs leading down to the chamber were narrow enough that the council descended single file, each master weaver carrying the weight of decades of expertise and the specific, combustible pride of people who had never been wrong about anything that mattered. Tibigia had seen similar processions in the military, officers being led to a briefing that would invalidate their operational assumptions. The results varied. Some adapted, some broke, some walked out and never came back. He stood at the chamber entrance with his back against the carved stone and his forearms burning beneath their bandages. Mariama's cipher had been itching since dawn, the raised scar tissue tightening and releasing in a rhythm that felt almost like a pulse, as if the dead woman's encoding had its own heartbeat in his flesh. The linen wrappings were stained with the salve Zuwera had prepared, shea butter and neem, the sharp medicinal smell mixing with the chamber's ambient scent of heated quartz and old stone. The salve helped with the surface irritation. It did nothing for the deeper burning, the bone-level warmth that flared whenever the encoding frequency shifted in the network around him. He catalogued the council as they entered. 12 faces, 12 responses to the amber light flooding upward from the first loom's tapestry of woven light. Master Weaver Abina, 82, the guild's most respected diagnostician, stopped 3 meters from the loom and pressed her gnarled hands against her mouth. Her eyes were wet before she took another step. Master Weaver Isaka, the ward specialist, went pale beneath his dark complexion and began whispering what sounded like a prayer or a curse or both. Master Weaver Fushina touched the nearest crystal column and pulled her hand back as though burned, then reached for it again with the deliberate courage of someone choosing knowledge over comfort. One by one they approached the tapestry. Master Abina first, her calloused fingers passing through the woven light, the encoding frequency recognizing the weaver's trained hands and responding with a surge of amber brilliance. The tapestry shared the unified encoding. Tibigia watched Abina's face transform from wonder to comprehension to grief, the grief of a master craftsperson discovering that her life's work was a single dialect in a language she had never been taught. "This is not our encoding," Abina whispered. "This is all encoding. Every fragment, every faction, all of it. We have been speaking a dialect and believing it was the entire language." 9 others followed. Each touch produced revelation. Isaka discovered his defensive encoding was a derivative of the enskinment's boundary pattern. Fushina found her long-range message patterns were miniature root-line communion channels. Each discovery peeled another layer from the guild's founding narrative, the cherished belief that fugu weaving was self-originated, independent, beholden to nothing. Tibigia's military mind catalogued the political fault lines forming in real time. 9 members were being transformed by contact with the tapestry. 2 were hanging back, cautious, processing, their body language carrying the tension of people whose certainties were crumbling, but whose institutional loyalty still held. And 1 had not moved from the bottom of the stairs. Master Weaver Quaim stood with his arms folded across his chest, and his jaw locked in the configuration of a man who had decided something before entering the room. Quaim was 58. He had built his reputation on the theoretical framework of independent encoding, the guild's central doctrine that fugu weaving was self-contained, self-originated, and self-sufficient. 3 published treatises, 2 decades of teaching. His institutional identity was not built on the founding narrative. It was the founding narrative given human form and a seat on the council. "I reject this," Quaim said. The amber light pulsed. 11 faces turned toward the 1 face that remained untouched. "The artifact is impressive." Quaim's voice carried the precise, formal register of a council member, entering an objection into the permanent record. But an impressive artifact does not rewrite 1,000 years of scholarship. Our encoding is our own, developed by our founders, refined by our masters, passed through a lineage that requires no external validation. Touch the tapestry, Quaim, Abina said. Her voice carried not authority but exhaustion, the weariness of a woman who had just experienced something that made institutional politics feel like children arguing over the shape of clouds. Or leave this chamber. But do not cite scholarship while the source text of everything we have ever written stands 3 meters from your hands. Quaim did not touch the tapestry. He turned to Adisa. Guild Master, this requires independent verification. A proper academic review, not a theatrical demonstration. Academic review of what? Adisa's voice was careful, controlled. She had touched the tapestry first, the previous day, and the transformation was already settled into her bearing. The calculation of a leader who had felt something true and was determining how to bring her people to the same truth. The encoding frequency is empirical. Every enchanted garment in this building has been performing better since the restoration. Your own students have reported unprecedented clarity in their practice looms. The evidence is not in this chamber, Quaim. It is in the cloth upstairs. It is in the thread your apprentices are weaving right now. Correlation is not causation. Touch the tapestry. I will not. The words were flat, final. Quaim unfolded his arms and straightened to his full height, a tall man made taller by conviction. I have spent 30 years defending the integrity of our tradition. I will not abandon that defense because of an underground artifact and an orphaned girl's claims about her dead mother. The temperature in the chamber dropped. Not physically, the alignment energy kept the space warm. Emotionally. Zuera, standing at the tapestry's edge with Mariama's encoded smock folded over her arm, went very still. The encoding frequency in the smock flickered once, a microsurge that Tibigia felt as a spike of heat through his bandaged forearms.
You are free to leave, Master Quaim,
Zuera said. Her voice was steady. Quiet. The voice of a woman who had carried her mother's last work across a territory, used it to shield a convergence, and was not going to be diminished by a man who refused to touch the truth because touching it would cost him his career.
The first loom will be here when you are ready.
Quaim left. His footsteps on the stone stairs were precise, measured, the rhythm of a man retreating with his dignity intact and his certainties reinforced by the specific, brittle strength of things that cannot bend. 2 others followed. Master Weaver Bo Tang, whose research had been funded by Quaim's theoretical framework, and Master Weaver Seidu, whose loyalty to Quaim was personal rather than intellectual. The split was clean. 9 in, 3 out. The guild fractured along the fault line that Tibigia had identified the moment the council descended the stairs. Adisa waited until the footsteps faded. Then she spoke with the voice of a leader who had anticipated this exact outcome and planned for it. The guild will restructure around the truth. The pattern keeper's knowledge will be integrated into the standard curriculum. The first loom will be accessible to every weaver who completes the foundational training. We will collaborate with the Tindana and the shadow binders and the custodians. She paused. Each word that followed came slowly, extracted from beneath decades of institutional loyalty. The alternative is to deny the truth and lose the guild's relevance entirely. The restored network is already teaching our apprentices things we cannot explain. If we do not lead this transition, the transition will happen without us. And Quaim's faction? Isaka asked. Quaim has the right to be wrong. He does not have the right to prevent the rest of us from being correct. Adisa looked at the tapestry. The woven light pulsed. We will leave a place for him. When his certainty costs him more than his pride can afford, he will come back. Or he will not. Either way, the truth does not require his permission. Zuera stepped forward. She lifted Mariama's 14 volumes from the leather satchel she had carried since the Pattern Keeper's archive had been opened beneath the first loom's dais. 14 volumes of accumulated knowledge, 3 centuries of clandestine custodianship. Each generation's keeper adding to the record, Mariama's contributions filling the final 3 with dense, meticulous notation in handwriting that Zuera had inherited along with the responsibility. She placed them on the tapestry's dais. The amber light caught the leather bindings, the worn spines, the ink-stained pages visible where the covers had warped with age. The smell of old paper and tanning leather mixed with the chamber's mineral warmth. A collision of the human and the ancient, the handwritten and the crystallized, the mortal record beside the immortal one.
These are the Pattern Keeper's complete archive.
Zuera said.
My mother's work, her mother's work. 300 years of unified encoding knowledge, maintained in secret because the guild's founders chose not to preserve it. The founders knew about the first loom. They chose to build the guild's identity on independence because the alternative, acknowledging that fugu weaving was a fragment of a system built by beings who predated human civilization, would have undermined the authority they were establishing.
She met Addis's eyes.
This is the legacy of a woman who died protecting knowledge the guild should have protected for her. Mariama Wulana was not the guild's enemy. She was its memory, and her memory is now the guild's future.
Addisa picked up the first volume, opened it with the careful hands of a master weaver handling irreplaceable textile, read the first page, closed the volume, held it against her chest for a moment that lasted longer than institutional calculation required. We will teach it, Addisa said. All of it beginning tomorrow. Tibigia pushed off from the wall. The movement sent a fresh wave of burning through his forearms, Mariama's cipher protesting the disturbance, the scar tissue pulling against the bandages with a sharp, dry heat that tasted of copper at the back of his throat. He moved to Zuera's side as the council began their slow ascent back to the surface, 9 weavers climbing toward a guild that would look the same from the outside and be utterly different within. He waited until the chamber was empty, except for the 2 of them and the amber light, and the hum of the first loom recording the moment for its permanent archive.
Your mother would be proud,
he said. Zuera said nothing. She stood with the encoded smock against her chest, and the 14 volumes arrayed on the dais behind her, and the weight of a lineage that had ended and begun in the same week pressing her shoulders into a posture that Tibigia recognized from soldiers who had completed missions that cost them more than they expected. The silence was the acknowledgement, the kind of silence that exists between people who have been through something together and do not need to narrate it. Tibigia knew this silence. It was the silence of the barracks after a hard deployment, the silence of a campfire after the debrief, the silence that says, I see what you carried, I was there, that is enough. He stood beside her in the amber light, his forearms burned, the loom hummed. The 14 volumes sat on the dais like 14 prayers answered too late for the woman who had written them. Somewhere above, the guild was changing. 9 masters carrying a truth that would reshape a 1,000-year-old institution. 3 masters carrying a denial that would isolate them further with each passing day. A young woman carrying her dead mother's work into the light. A soldier carrying a dead woman's cipher in his skin. The investigation had reached a new phase. Not a case closure, the political fault lines were active, the institutional fracture was real, and Quaim's faction would not simply accept marginalization. The truth had been revealed. The truth's consequences had only begun. Tibigia's military mind assessed the terrain. 9 allies, 3 adversaries, an institution in transition, and a tapestry of woven light that was recording everything with the patient, comprehensive attention of a system that had been waiting 1,000 years for this moment. He filed the assessment. The soldier who noticed things noticed one more. The bandage on his left forearm had loosened, and the scar tissue beneath was visible in the amber light, geometric lines of raised flesh tracing Mariama's cipher across his muscles. The pattern glowed faintly in the first loom's radiance, not enchanted, responsive, the encoding branded into his unmagical flesh, resonating with its source the way a tuning fork resonates with the instrument that struck it. He pulled the bandage tight. He could examine the implications later. The truth was in the thread now. The thread was in the open. And the soldier who had followed warm, dead hands to a loom was standing guard while the pattern wove itself into a future that no one, not the guild, not the pattern keepers, not the man with the cipher burned into his arms, could fully predict. Case ongoing, evidence accumulating, the investigation continued.